The tides of the Earth's seas and oceans are caused by the gravitational pull of the moon. It creates two bulges or high tides on either side of the Earth each day. The tide travels all the way up the River Deben as far as Melton. With the ebb and flow of the tide, the River Deben is an extension of the sea. The gentle slopes of the Deben Valley make it easy to grow crops and keep animals. People settled here as they had everything they needed. Historians think that there was activity in the Woodbridge area as early as the Neolithic period. Woodbridge formed part of the kingdom of the Anglo-Saxon Lord Redwald. It is Redwald's burial boat that was found under Sutton Hoo, just across the river from Woodbridge. By the time of the Norman conquest, Woodbridge was a thriving farming community. William the Conqueror rewarded two of his best soldiers with large stretches of land in the area. The tide mill is not mentioned in Domesday Book. Sometime before 1170, though, a mill was constructed roughly where it stands today. Though probably not stone-built, it may have looked something like this medieval tide mill in northern France. Although milling is only possible during the short spell between high and low tide, tide mills have the advantage of reliability. The water supply doesn't depend on rainfall, you see. A safe harbour surrounded by rich farmland made Woodbridge an attractive place for trade and commerce. The Normans built a substantial manor, built a priory, a church, a tide mill, and establishing a market and annual fairs. Although it grew steadily up until the 14th century, Woodbridge was always in the shadow of Gosford. Gosford was a large port at the mouth of the Deben, with easy access to the open sea, but time and tide were working in favour of Woodbridge. Over the course of the 200 years, the power of the sea changed the shape of the coastline. As Woodbridge continued to grow as a trading centre, Gosford declined. Woodbridge entered its golden age. Served by oak from the forests around Framlingham, Woodbridge became known as a good place to build not just commercial vessels, but naval craft as well. In 1654, Woodbridge produced the Maidstone, a 550-ton, 40-gun frigate. Later, she was renamed Mary Rose. She is shown here in 1669, battling Algerian pirates. The largest ship to be built in Woodbridge was the Kingfisher in 1675. She was built to tackle Algerian pirates and all. She was able to change her appearance too. She could lure the pirates in close before firing her guns. Woodbridge had a busy sail-making industry, and rope was also made in the town, along with tackle blocks, masts, and many other parts of a sailing boat's rigging. As well as all the shipbuilding, Woodbridge also became famous for salt. Rock salt was dissolved in hot brine from the Deben and then evaporated in tanks. This produced very fine white salt, which sold all over the country. Flour milling was also big business in Woodbridge. As well as several new windmills, the small 12th century tide mill was completely rebuilt in 1793. That's the building that you still see today. All through the 17th, 18th and early 19th centuries, Woodbridge was second only to Ipswich as a centre of Suffolk trade. Coal, iron, salt, corn, wines and spirits, and all manner of manufactured goods came in and out of Woodbridge from ports all over England. Many of the vessels that used the port were owned by local businessmen. In the late 17th century, Jonathan Bass owned a salt refining business, the tide mill, and several merchant vessels. In the 1840s, George Manby owned the tide mill, whilst also operating as a coal and corn merchant. The commerce that the tide brought to Woodbridge supported businessmen, sailors, craftsmen, farmers, and labourers. It made Woodbridge wealthy. All good things must end, they say, and Woodbridge shipbuilding in its heyday came to a close in the mid-19th century. Salt making also came to an end in the town in 1816. Woodbridge's trading success had been built on small craft carrying cargo to and from London. These loads are also ideal for transport by steam train. In June 1859, Woodbridge Railway Station opened for business. The tide mill, though, continued in everyday production until 1957. Though she was under pressure from steam and later diesel-powered mills. Woodbridge boatyards continued to repair vessels, and in 1884 the Robertson family took over the Limekiln Quay for the production of leisure craft. The yard is still in business today, building and repairing craft of all shapes and sizes. Railway traffic too dwindled as industry and shipping moved to Ipswich and Felixstowe. Woodbridge Goods Yard closed in 1966. The railway continued to bring visitors to Woodbridge Mine and new residents from ever further afield. Today, the pulse of the tides continues to beat in Woodbridge. The tide mill is now restored to its former glory and is producing traditional stone-ground flour again. The Deben Yacht Club, the Woodbridge Cruising Club and the Marina all help to preserve the town's links with the sea by supporting sailing as a leisure activity. For over 1400 years, the River Deben has drawn people to Woodbridge. Throughout all the challenges and changes, the tide has provided the steady heartbeat that kept Woodbridge alive. May that continue as long as the moon moves the water.